tell you how it will be. There's one for you, 19 for me. And I'm the Taxman. Yeah, I'm the Taxman.
Hello, America. I'm Dr. Jake Jacobs. The Beatles' 1966 song Taxman is one of the greatest tax protest songs of all time. Taxman, the Beatles' very first political song, was written by lead guitarist George Harrison when he realized that the British progressive-punitive tax scheme was taking up to 90% of the Beatles' hard-earned income. It's interesting to know that in the song Taxman, the Beatles pick on both the Labour and Conservative parties, the two main political parties in Britain at that time. Around the time of the Beatles' tax protest song, the United States progressive punitive tax scheme was at 70%, which was brought down by Democrat President Kennedy and Johnson in 1964 from a very high 91% level. JFK said this classic line in defense of his tax cut, quote, "It is a paradoxical truth that tax rates are too high today and tax revenues are too low, and the soundest way to raise the revenues in the long run is to cut the tax rates now." President Kennedy then went on to state, quote, "A tax cut means higher family income and higher business profits and a balanced federal budget. Every taxpayer and his family will have more money left over after taxes for a new car, a new home, new conveniences, education and investment. Every businessman can keep a higher percentage of his profits in his cash register or put it to work expanding or improving his business. And as the national income grows, the federal government will ultimately end up with more revenues." Now, where did Kennedy get his tax cut ideas? Well, he got them from studying Republican President Calvin Coolidge and Coolidge's brilliant Secretary of Treasury, Andrew Mellon's tax plan of the 1920s. Now, Mellon and Coolidge realized that President Wilson, the creator of the egregious federal income tax amendment and the progressive punitive tax scheme of 1913, had created a tax level so high at 77%, it was having a disastrous effect on the economy, businesses, and on the hard-working American people. Mellon states in his classic book, Taxation, the People's Business, quote, "The history of taxation shows that taxes which are inherently excessive are not paid. The high rates inevitably put pressure upon the taxpayer to withdraw his capital from productive businesses." Now, like President Kennedy, President Ronald Reagan was a student and a fan of President Coolidge, Andrew Mellon. President Reagan, just like Kennedy and Coolidge, understood the very negative effect that too high of a tax rate was having on the American people. In 1981, Ronald Reagan passed the largest tax cut to date in American history, bringing the progressive punitive tax scheme from 70% way down to 28%. And while liberal lefty naysayers attacked Reagan as they did with Calvin Coolidge and John Kennedy as foolish trickle-down economic nonsense, Reagan's tax cuts proved to be a resounding success, creating millions of jobs and prosperity for millions and millions of hard-working Americans. Now, this past December, President Trump, a student of Coolidge, Kennedy, and Reagan, passed a Kennedy-Reagan-style huge tax cut for the American people. In a very short time, we have seen American businesses expand, productivity increase, salaries rise, unemployment at record lows, and overseas capital returning to America in the billions. Now, while I am very, very optimistic over Americans being able to keep and save and invest more of their hard-earned income, I am equally concerned that both Democrats and Republicans, they still love to spend way too much of our money and spend money that we don't have, adding to the already ridiculous debt of $20 trillion and growing. If this federal deep state spending continues at this rate, it could eventually cripple our children's ability to live a prosperous and free American life. Let us work to put into office those leaders who understand Economics 101 and the destructive effect of a federal government taxes that are way too high and the ridiculous spending by a federal government gone wild in Washington, D.C. The more they spend, the less free we are. This is Jake Jacobs. May God bless you. And until next time, always remember, the truth shall set you free. If you thought that was cool, check out more videos on FreedomProject.com. You'll enjoy them.